Yo, hey everybody, welcome back to the JPU show. I'm Badr and I've got my co-host, the amazing big brain Blythe Brumleaf, here with me as well. Blythe, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I think in the
That was the most unconvincing. I'm doing all right.
yeah, it's we're talking about the true cost of podcasting, hosting software, etc. What does it cost to run a podcast, and how much do we spend? And I started collecting some numbers for this, and I'm a little annoyed.
You know, podcasting with you makes me realize that I might have too much preamble and filibuster at the beginning of my shows, because the way you hit the ground running is like a Navy SEAL that's just been launched from a plane 60,000 feet in the air, and it's just going to work on the baddies. All right. Mission driven is what I'll say. All right. Well, I guess since you've already kind of teased the topic, Blythe, I will turn it over to you. You wanted to talk about the true cost of podcasting. Hit it.
Yeah, so I wanted to do two different breakdowns. So one one breakdown for when I did everything myself, because I think that it's important for you to, even if you do have a sponsored supported show, you still, or you outsource some of the task. I think it's important at a baseline level that you have the ability to record something, to edit it and upload it and get it out to the world. Like that base skill level, you need to know, no matter if you hire or outsource or whatever. You can simplify that process. You can simplify the costs. But the reason I say all this is because there was a lot more costs in it than I kind of thought. I thought I had a good sort of round out number of what it cost me per month versus per year, and how I sort of think about those different cost breakdowns. I have admittedly been, I am an entrepreneur, I am a business owner, but I have always led from more of, until the last year or so, I have led from the sort of creative mindset that you make good content, you make good products, and sales will come to you. You still have to be mindful of your expenses, and you kind of think in the back of your head, oh, okay, well, I'm making money from the podcast now, so I can invest in these different things. And when you do get sponsors, and when you do sort of grow your show, the more shows you make, the more you outsource, the more tools you need, the investments you make into equipment and things like that, all of those things start to add up. So you really need to be conscious of these things, and the money that's coming in and the money that's going out, unplanned expenses. You have to be wary of all of this. So I have admittedly become much more stronger in my financial game over the last year, and it's strengthened a lot of aspects of my business. But I think, you and I have discussed, we know that podcasting is not a straight line from here's the expense and here is the revenue and here is the listener that went through all of these things, became a customer, all of those things to sort of show us that the podcasting is worth it. Worth an ROI is your own definition. We have other videos on that where you can check that out on what different ROI methods exist within the world of podcasting. But for the sake of this conversation, I broke it down into two different ways. So the stuff that I do now versus the stuff that I did when I had to do all by myself. So we have those two different mindsets. So full disclosure, I do have two contractors that I work with on the show. One is a content remixer, and then the other is a podcast and video editor. So I pay those two contractors every single month, and that is by far the biggest expense. So the content remixer for me is $1,000 a month. What she does is essentially, after I get done recording a show, I only have to answer a few questions before the episode is published live. So YouTube thumbnails, the audio version of the show is uploaded to Buzzsprout. The title of the episode, the description, we use pull quotes within the conversation. So those three aspects, the sort of the copy, the wording is really the only things I have to worry about after the show is recorded. The content remixer for $1,000 a month takes care of everything else. So uploading to YouTube, scheduling them all out on Buzzsprout and YouTube, adding them to an email marketing newsletter, adding the YouTube link to a tool called Opus in order to create social media clips that she then takes and puts, anywhere from 3 to 5 clips per show out to social media. So we have that whole sort of distribution funnel that has been set up. I used to do that all myself, but as a business owner, as you grow, you have to learn to sort of let go of the things that you want to be maniacal about controlling. You have to trust that other people are going to be able to do those things for you. So content remixer is $1,000 a month, and a podcast video editor is about $600 a month. You also have to keep in mind the more shows you do, depending on your sponsorship agreements, if you have those in place or not, the more shows you do, typically it's going to be more expensive. So those are the people costs, not counting any of my time. And I'm not going to count any of that towards, a profit and loss statement or a financial statement. So we're already looking at about $1,600 a month just for the people who are helping me manage the podcast. Now, where I think that it gets a little difficult is on the software side of things, the management side of things. These are where those costs, they seem low at the time, but they add up very quickly, and that is part of why I'm a little annoyed. So let's run through them. First of all, any questions on the people side of things?
No, I apparently am on the wrong side of podcasting. I should be a what did you call it? A podcast remixer. That's a hell of a
content
title.
remixer.
Content remixer, sorry.
So you're taking long form content and you're turning it into short form content to drive, episode downloads. And, frankly, for a lot of the people that I have, is my show is mainly interview focused. So for a lot of like social media clips, a lot of these business owners, they don't know the first thing about making their own social media clip. They don't know the first thing about editing a vertical video, adding captions to it, things like that. So it's very valuable, especially on LinkedIn, for them to see themselves in a clip like that, sharing their expertise. So that's why I choose to invest in it. And a lot of these numbers will make sense because I am sponsor supported, so I can justify these costs. But with that said, there's still room to make some cuts, as I'm discovering today. So a lot of so we talked about the people side of things. So then there's 2 groups that I would put these different software SaaS subscription models into. So there's podcast management and ops. That's one category. And then there's the marketing side of things. So I'm going to run through podcast management and ops. So podcast hosting is the first one. That is costing me $66 a month. And that is because I release 8 episodes a month, so you're going to have a higher fee. Anytime you have more data, it's typically more money. But I also pay for co-host AI from Buzzsprout. That gives me the transcript, that also names the speakers within the conversation. Chapter markers, I feel like, are very important in a conversation. So I choose to pay I think it's extra $30 a month for the co-host AI. So it's a huge time saver for me and the content remixer, for her to be able to knock that out. Now, the next one is editing software. That goes back to when I used to have to do it myself, or if I still need to, like my podcast editor this week is on vacation. If I were to need an episode, now I scheduled appropriately because he's on vacation, but if I needed an episode to go out this week, then I could still go back and use this software to edit an episode. Probably take me forever to do it, probably waste a lot of time, hours spent on that particular task. But that cost me $200 one time. I can edit the video and I can edit the audio. The tool is called Camtasia. I know you're also a big fan of Camtasia. We have our gripes with it, of course, but it's by far the easiest video editing software. I can save templates to it, so I can edit very quickly. I've had, like a Fiverr freelancer make some animations that I can use for the intro, or like the lower thirds with somebody's name on it, the outro. So that is in a template format that I can load right into Camtasia. Love Camtasia. It was $200 one time years ago. Now they do have new features that come out, of course. You can do the upgrade. I think you actually just did an upgrade for, $100, maybe $200. Didn't you do the upgrade, right?
Yeah, they do like annual upgrades. And that comes with extra bells and whistles, and you get like a year technical support and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. So you have the option to either pay that one time or you can upgrade every few years. It's really up to you. But if you pay for it one time, you typically can use the software for life. So I like that. That's the only one on this list that is going to be a one-time charge. The next one that I use is called SavvyCal, and that is $140 a year. This allows me to have a flexible calendar that I can say I can as a business owner, I'm only going to record on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And I set up my calendar so that, whatever meetings I have on the calendar is blocked out on SavvyCal. But it works very similarly to like a Calendly or, another, sort of calendar scheduling software, but it is the by far the easiest tool scheduling wise that I've seen. It links in to their calendar. It also links into my calendar. So as soon as they book it, I can ask survey questions, which I
Hmm.
love. I can send them regular reminder emails. So anything like, please have a microphone, please use headphones, please close, browser tabs, things like that you want to send is bring water, these gentle reminders for the guest that is coming on the show. Because again, not everybody is doing podcast interviews all the time. So I really love SavvyCal. That is a must purchase for me that I will probably have that subscription for a while. So that's 140 a year. I do pay for ChatGPT. That's $20 a month, $240 a year. Dropbox storage for all of the files. That's 120 a year. ClickUp project management is about $200 a year per user. I live and breathe through ClickUp. Badr can tell you I'm very annoying about it. Squadcast is what I used to use, very similar to Riverside, which is what we're using to record this conversation. I now use StreamYard, and the reason I use StreamYard is because it allows me to be able to share a browser tab and play audio from that browser tab.
Hmm.
A lot of these recording softwares don't let you do that. Squadcast didn't let me do that, which Descript owns them now. Maybe they'll change that in the future, but it was the single reason why I left them and went to StreamYard, is because I can share a browser tab and be able to play the audio from it, have some commentary on it, things like that. So that one is $468 a year. So that one is a pricier one. So that is the podcast management sort of ops side of things. Now on the marketing side of things, I pay for a tool called Opus Clips, which creates those social media clips. That is about $500 a year. You're typically paying for the amount of data you're putting in. So if you have, say, a 3-hour show each week, you are paying for those 3 hours to be loaded into Opus for their AI to scan all of your content to find those really good social media clips that you can share out and distribute to your audience to get people to, listen to the full show. There's also a mobile video editing app called Video Leap. That's about $70 a year. I do pay for that one. Not sure that I'm really going to need that, but I do really like using them. Between them and CapCut, I could probably just get rid of Video Leap and just keep CapCut.
Yeah.
So next one is Canva subscription. So that one is also another essential. That's $140 a year. I used to pay for Buffer, which is a social media scheduling tool. That was about $250 a year. I just moved over to a company called Socialmonials. So that is what we are using now. It allows you to post to all different social media channels. Important thing though is it allows you to upload your video clips, text, and image posts. We are literally like a month into this, and so far so good. What I really like about them is that they are providing analytics reports, and I can separate our different social media posts by category. So I can have different posts belong to a different category and then run an analytics report for that specific category. So that is useful if you have multiple sponsors or you have multiple campaigns going on, where you can kind of, as your show grows, you really have to think about how you're going to be managing the campaign side of things, because your sponsors are going to be asking for these kinds of performance reports. I have not been able to provide that kind of insight other than just screenshots and here's, good which is important too. So they can see kind of the creative of the content that you're making. But this will give us an additional layer that I'll be able to create those reports super quick versus spending like 3 days, like I previously just did a week ago, on making an analytics report for a podcast sponsor that I'm hoping to renew. So that is another big one. that I would say is really important, and it is expensive. You could do a lot of this manually, but you're going to run into future issues where it's going to take a long time to create reports. You don't really know what your audience is resonating on social media, which social media channel. So these things become a little bit more complex, and you have to have a way to manage it. Next one is MailChimp, which is email marketing. So that's about $480 a year. I think that one is very important as well, as far as like onboarding campaigns and regular engagement with your audience. Much like a podcast, email subscriptions are one of the few platforms, or one of the 3 platforms, that you will ever truly own the connection with your audience. So I'm always going to preach the value of having, some kind of email capture tool that you can be able to engage with your audience directly. So all of those numbers that I just threw out on the software management ops side of things, not people, it's about $3,400 annually, which sounds
Wow.
like a lot. I know,
No,
I know it sounds like a lot.
that is a lot. It's not just sounds like a lot. That is a lot.
Well, so if we think about it in monthly terms, you can budget about $300 a month in order to cover those costs. However, that doesn't factor in the people costs. The people costs for any business is going to be the most expensive line item on your financial statement. Always. So that one is separately $1,600 a month. So roughly I spend about $2,000 a month for all of it. Now, I can make the case that some of these tools, Dropbox, ClickUp, SavvyCal, I am using these in other aspects of my business. So it's not directly podcast related, but it's still podcast heavy. And because I do have a niche audience, which is also very important for me to justify spending all of this money. I'm pointing at the screen as if you guys can see me, all of these different things that I'm spending money on. Because of the niche audience and because of the value of a lead that I can send to my sponsors, they justify the increased sponsorship rate. So for full disclosure, I earn anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a month off of the podcast. Now, I have a logistics audience. I never made that much in sports and entertainment. And because of that sponsorship cost, I can justify the $2,000 a month that it costs to run everything else. Now, that doesn't include, sort of operational costs, travel to conferences, things like that. Unless the conference is wanting me to speak, then I typically will get them to cover at least my conference ticket and my hotel. If I'm lucky, I'm starting to say no to conferences that don't pay for my airfare, because I'm starting to notice these things are expensive. And that's an added cost onto $2,000 a month that I have to be hyper aware, hyper conscious of where the money is going. I can make some cuts here, though. Absolutely. Not on the people side of things. I can't make cuts there because I do feel like they're kind of at their max of the services that they're giving me for the time that they're spending. Where I could make some investments in the future is somebody that is completely dedicated to only making social media friendly clips. The AI is close. Opus Clips AI software is close. It's not all the way there yet, in my opinion. So I think that there's some playing around that I could do there. I don't know where else I would really cut, though. I mean, I'm looking right now, and I'm mad that I'm spending this much money. But now that I could cut Video Leap. That's $70 a year. It's kind of insignificant compared to the rest of this. I don't really know what else. Maybe cut out the co-host AI from Buzzsprout, because I could get technically the transcripts from StreamYard, and I could just auto load those in there into the Buzzsprout system. So I could do that, and we could just manually put in chapter markers. That's something that I will probably consider, because I thought I was spending closer to about $50 a month on Buzzsprout with co-host AI. Now, podcast hosting, that's not an expense that you can really get around. But the co-host AI, it might be supplemented from some of these other, say ChatGPT subscription. StreamYard already provides me a transcript, so I'm kind of good there. And I could probably take that transcript, throw it into ChatGPT, and have them create chapter markers for me, which I'm thinking it out through my head now. So I think that that's probably going to happen. But that's not that much that I would be trimming off of the budget.
So it
Maybe like
sounds like
$300 a year that I would be able to knock off of, God, it's disgusting how much. Yeah,
I
it's a
got to give
lot.
you kudos for having your numbers to this granular level. I mean, granted, you're also talking about software and things that are applicable in your on the business, like your business side of things that cross over. So I think there's a little bit of that, but I know as a new podcaster, if I heard this episode, I would be scared to jump into this field. But I don't think.
Do
Obviously,
you think any of that is outrageous? Like, what would you chop out?
Whew. Well, I guess this is the mentality. This is where our mentality is kind of. I think you put a value in time in automating and using software to do some of that granular work, which I think is genius. But as someone who is not making the same sponsorship dollars and things like that, I don't. And just someone that's a little more enjoys kind of being a little more hands on with some of these things. All of any of those like self video or any of those AI programs you've got, I think. Oh,
So
okay.
I pulled up the breakdown. I don't know if this helps or not, and I don't know if I just screwed you up video editing wise. But this is maybe it's a little bit helpful to see it sort of laid out. I probably could have done a better job formatting this. And this is definitely not what it looks like inside my financial statement, but just going off the top of my head. And then I used a tool called Rocket Money to go back through and see how much I've spent on, specific tools and specific things. So this is, sort of I guess a peek behind the curtain, but I don't know of anything that I could chop out of here except for the people expense. When you produce more content, it's going to cost more money. And when you have a business, you have to get to the level of being able to delegate and being able to send work to people who are going to be able to do the things that you frankly shouldn't be doing. Like I know I've talked to you about this. You have an affinity towards editing and you like doing that. But there are other things maybe in this process that you could outsource to someone else to take care of it for you. And that just comes with sort of documenting your processes, figuring out what you need to do, figuring out what you want to do, and then figuring out how you can pay somebody to take care of these other administrative tasks, especially administrative tasks that you don't want to do that are also affordable for you to find somebody specifically that will handle that task for you.
Yeah, I'm looking at your costs and I'm like, okay, I probably wouldn't pay for Opus Clips for the year. That's just something I'll do on my own.
Well, let me stop you there, because if I were to pay somebody to do that, that would cost me about $500 a month, because I have paid for that before. So that is another thing to keep in mind. Either you're going to spend hours doing it yourself, or you could pay a tool to be able to figure it out for you.
Yeah, and like I said, I think we're both representative of two different kind of like indie podcasters. Yourself, who's managed to use the podcast to funnel into your business, and you are like, your podcast is within your industry, which is a lucrative industry, and you've got someone like me that's got a hobby podcast where I am making some money off of it, but not enough to warrant me paying someone else to do a lot of like the heavy lifting, because that's just I just wouldn't be making any money on the podcast. So that's the mindset I'm looking at, is some of these, especially the marketing costs. I'm like, well, to me, it's worth spending an hour or two for one clip to, save myself $500 a year. Because that, that's more than the, I'm making on Patreon for, whatever, 2 months.
But then I would also say on the Opus side of things, that definitely makes an impact. And then from switching from Buffer to Social Monials, which is the new company that we're with now, they are now providing me with those resources that I can create a campaign performance report for all of the episodes that we have created with them, for all of the social posts that we have created for them. I mean, we're in a volume game now, not as much as like big news agencies or anything like that, but we do a lot for a small team. And so being able to not have to spend 3 days of my time coming up with an analytics report for a sponsor, I can now do that in a click of a button. So some of these, you have to look at them as investments into your show. Like, this is not by any means something that a typical podcaster should think about investing in. This is after you've established a good show, after you have secured sponsors. These are the things you need to be thinking about next as your show grows.
I think as you're growing your podcast, and if you are thinking of using it as a means to make a livable wage and become, a business and incorporate it with your business, like, these are realistic costs that makes sense for you, especially the marketing things where it's like you are a one-person shop and you need to outsource and you need to use your time wisely. Where for me, the podcast is a passion hobby, and I'm fortunate to make money in it, and I will cut corners and I will put time into it to save me some money. It's both a combination of me being fiscally kind of like conscious, but also like kind of enjoying that creation side, because I've just seen what some of these automated processes spit out, and it's just not to my liking.
I think that that's definitely a preference thing. I would agree with you on the Opus side of things, especially when I first started using them. I will say, though, it has gotten better because they've added the ability to have longer clips. And I think when it has, you can choose an option. The short form clips is where it's really tough to make a good video in under a minute, because you have to be concise, and it's tough to find that concise clip in a long form piece of content. So what we have been experimenting with lately is having longer clips to where they are 5 to 10 minutes long. And I think with the nature of my show format, where we're typically 45 to an hour recording time, where I can take that and say, pick the best 5 to 10 minutes. It automatically removes the filler words. You can add in, some B-roll if you want. You can add in transitions, which I think you can change up the frames. It has gotten a lot better. And so if maybe you tried Opus Clips before and it didn't really do much for you, but I will agree, I would like to find somebody that is highly specialized in using Opus, but also knowing what a good clip looks like. And I think that's probably the biggest struggle we have had historically, is finding the clip that finds the complete thought. And with shorter clips, I would tend to agree that Opus might not ever be good at that. But I think that's more, it speaks to the nature of the long form content than, because making short form content is very hard. Yeah. But I would still, so if I went through and I just did this quick calculation, so the ones that I bolded here would probably be the only absolutely necessary things that you need to do a show. That comes out to about $1,200 a year. So if you think about it, and I'm not doing any advertising. So, I mean, right there is a perfect use case. If I were to do this all myself, manually, it would cost about $1,200 a year. Which is obviously a significant savings, but as you grow in your show, as you grow in your business, you have to start delegating. Yeah, it becomes scary, but these are the kinds of things that, hopefully these realistic numbers, because I mean, we're both looking at this. I don't know where I would chop. You mentioned Opus, but that's only $500. Like, what else is coming out?
And you know what? And I think that comes down to personal preference, right? Like, I think especially for you can make I mean, obviously there's a use case for each one of these. I'm looking at a few of these. I'm like, it just don't make sense for my use case. And hopefully people that are listening are one, still here. They haven't been shocked and scared away by the price tag. But maybe it drives home the point that podcasting is not cheap. Whether we're talking financially, monetary, there is obviously cost to all of the things that come with podcasting. We haven't even talked about equipment, right? Like,
I left that specifically out of this.
Camera, microphones, etc. it costs to play. It costs to be a podcaster in some way. There's a ton of free options, and maybe we should consider doing a video in that where maybe we find a free option for each one of these, because I think there's plenty of them out there. But I think, they're I won't say they're slim pickings, but you're going to get what you pay for when considering free. So with that being said, I think things to keep in mind, maybe as a podcaster, maybe you haven't done this homework where you're looking at what it truly costs to you. I think everyone, and we talked about it in the other video we recorded today, that I think everyone should know their number. Like what it does it cost for you to run your show, and knowing your number, I think, goes a long way when you consider trying to make money off it, seeking sponsors, and maybe even like cost saving benefit. You're looking at your costs and you're like, I think I can save money here, save money here. I think doing this homework can be a shocker and eye opening, but I think there's a lot of power in knowing this stuff here. And maybe some of this isn't applicable to all podcasters, but I think for folks that are trying to reach the level that you're at and have your podcast be kind of one with your business, this is good stuff to know. You
didn't have any idea that this is what I spent?
I know that you have a ton of tools in your toolbox, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But once again, like you've got to consider it's in the same bucket as your business. These are expenses that make sense for your business, your podcast and your business. Almost like that line is blurred. For me, it's like very black and white. So I know how much I'm willing to spend on the podcast for it to make sense for me, and I don't mind putting a little bit of time. For you, time is literally everything.
Time is money. We have to be efficient with a small team, and this software definitely helps with that. But when you look at these kinds of numbers, it also you got to also pay attention to your revenue numbers as well. We mentioned in another episode about when we knew that it was time to start charging and start having sponsors on your show. I would make the argument that these kinds of costs, you should also diversify your revenue. You should think about having a print-on-demand store for podcast merch. You probably won't sell much, but when you do, it will definitely be a good pat on the back that people are supporting you. You have ways for people to support you. I have noticed there's one creator on YouTube, Screen Crush. He now creates custom merch using a print-on-demand store, and he creates these designs. Honestly, they're not that good. So if you have a little bit of a creative bone in your body, then that is something that you could think about as tying merch into each new episode that you drop and using that as your sponsor ad inside of your show in order to generate more revenue streams. Patreon is another one that you could think about as far as revenue streams, and then having a good mix of sponsors, but then also thinking about what can I create that I can send my audience to where I get majority of the money. So those are just a few different things to think about. Yeah, we're going to talk about costs, but revenue streams, that's something to think about as well, is diversifying your revenue stream so that you can continue to support the growth of your show and where you choose to make those investments and why. Because, even though I started this episode off like super annoyed, I'm looking at this and I besides a couple $100 cutting off of a few $100, less than $500 a year cutting off of this, there's not much else I could cut.
Well said, and I'm glad that you've got this. You were able to use our recording as a therapy and financial session as well. With that said, I think we are at a good stopping point, so I want to go ahead and address the listeners. I thank them so much for checking this episode out, and would love to hear if you've got your number, if you know what it costs for you to run your podcast. Would love to hear how you've calculated it, maybe some advice for cutting costs, and etc. And as always, if you haven't subscribed already, whether you're listening to the audio version or the video version, please do that for us, all right? Give us a subscribe, leave a rating
Support
and
the
review.
damn show. This shit's expensive.
Yeah, as you can tell, it's expensive to run this podcast. So help us out where you can by doing the free stuff. And thank you so much for checking it out. We'll catch you soon, all right? Peace.